All right, we're going to resume here. We have community builders here, Jerry Joseph and John Dunn from the Valley CDC. So, take it away.
Well, we're very glad to be here. I'm Jerry Joseph. I'm the director of the Springfield office for the community builders. And I am, our company is the lead developer of what we think is a very, very qualified team that we've put together to do this development plan. The team includes community builders, Valley CDC, the local CDC in Northampton. Our design firm is Calthorpe Associates, which I'll tell you a little bit more about as we go along here. Calthorpe Associates is based in Berkeley, California. They're one of the most nationally renowned urban design and new urbanist, or old urbanists, as some people like to describe it, firms. Mount Auburn Associates, who is based in Somerville and has an office here in Northampton, is a strategic economic analysis firm that's going to be doing some of the data analysis and targeting on the economic development side of this plan. And Samuel D. Plotkin and Associates, who are the largest commercial real estate broker in Western Massachusetts, who will be doing the marketing and lease-up on the commercial side. Community Builders is a nonprofit corporation. We were formed in 1964. We have, in that time, we are specialized in the development of affordable housing, developed over 10,000 units of housing, either on our own or in partnership with nonprofits throughout Massachusetts and the greater Northeast. We've been involved in financing of over $800 million of projects. We have a management company that manages about 5,000 units of housing, and we have 7 offices throughout the Northeast. Financing and placing financing is a big part of our business. This is just a representative list of some of the types of firms that we've worked with, that we've been able to raise financing from small local companies, local banks like East Hampton Savings Bank, to large corporations like John Hancock Life Insurance and Lehman Brothers. As we said, we specialize in affordable housing. This is a project that we built, worked with a local CDC in Boston called Langham Court. This is a mixed income development, and much in line, not necessarily architecturally, although some of the design features we think are important, but in terms of building quality housing that can serve a whole range of incomes. And we have people living in this development that are very low income to people who are paying market rate housing. We also have done a lot of work in adaptive reuse. This building is the before shot. This is the after shot. This is a mill in Uxbridge, Massachusetts, that was converted to elderly housing an elderly housing complex of about 40 units. In recent years, we have gotten much more involved in sort of comprehensive development, dealing with neighborhoods, dealing with large-scale community development projects. This is a site plan that we have worked on in Boston with the Orchard Park neighborhood development that we're doing with the Boston Housing Authority. We're also doing in Holyoke, working with the Holyoke Housing Authority in the city of Holyoke. We've designated with Calthorpe Associates as the site planner, designated as the developer for their Hope 6 project, which is taking the Jackson Parkway Apartments complex in Holyoke and using that to leverage a revitalization of an entire neighborhood in Holyoke. We've also done some commercial development. This is our office building in Boston. It's about 100,000 square feet. All nonprofit tenants. We have our offices in this building. It's right near the Back Bay station. This is a 32,000 square foot office building that we did with the Fields Corner CDC in Boston. Just an example of how you can take an older building and convert it to a different kind of a use. John, you want to talk a little bit about Valley CDC, which most of you know.
This will be very brief because most of you know a lot about us. We're 10 years old. We're a private nonprofit, and we have developed or assisted with people's purchase and or development of about 150 units of affordable housing. Most of our projects in Northampton have had an historic preservation aspect to them. and we think that that's important in this particular project. We have also, on the economic development side, provided technical assistance and/or financial assistance to hundreds of individuals and small businesses in the area. Our organization, many members of whom have been involved looking at this particular project for a really long time. That's you again, sorry. That's a 82 Bridge Street historic rehab. Actually, Community Builders was the development consultant on that project, and that's housing 15 individuals. And one of the specific uses of this property was for people who were deinstitutionalized from the hospital, and actually there was a lot of cooperation between DMH and the Alliance for the Mentally Ill in the development of that project. And I'll go through these others very quickly because you know them. That's a downtown South Street building, obviously. A little shot of that. This is a business getting off the ground in a reused mill building in the area, which is something that we have looked at in 2 different locations, and we've recently received some funds to do it in East Hampton. And finally, what we've learned is the way you do development in this town is you have to involve everybody, and we think that's a good thing. And this is a groundbreaking of a project where Smith Vogt built the house. The kids built the house. The city sold the land very cheaply to the land trust, and we were the development consultant on that. 2 home ownership units came out of that.
Okay. Samuel Plotkin Associates, who are going to be doing marketing and consulting around the business side of this. They've been in business 35 years. They're recognized as the leading commercial broker in Western Massachusetts. Relatively large volume of sales and leasing. Have had a lot of major clients that they manage buildings for. They'll be consulting on the commercial development components. They will be doing commercial marketing and sales, and potentially will be doing some of the property management. The context here we want to talk about a little bit is, and if Bruce Fuguchi, who is our designer from Calthorpe Associates, was here, this is his part. So you're going to have to imagine a urban designer talking through this, but we're going to do the best we can. He had to go back to California after the presentation last week. But the context we think about is very similar to the folks from Sustainable Development. We think that there needs to be that this particular site is very important, has a lot of history, there's a lot of assets about the site. And this is a slide of a site actually that Calthorpe is working on in Ohio. Firestone owns that site. And this is a slide of how the site potentially could have been developed under the zoning, with basically the site completely covered with a subdivision allowable under the zoning at that time. And this is how they proposed to redevelop it, with clusters of housing and commercial use in various parts of the site, and preserving a large portion of the site for open space and for public usage. And a lot of the thinking that goes behind this is really what Calthorpe is bringing to our planning process. This is suburbanism, I guess is the way that they describe it. This is how, over the last 30 years, development has taken place, with large tracts of land and uses being segregated. You have in the middle here a big residential use, and you've got a commercial use here. And the importance here is to see that in order for someone to get from here to the store, they have to get in a car and they have to drive all the way around and back into that shopping center. You saw a slide just like this before. This is this is typical suburban development using large amounts of land, lots of blacktop. It's what we want to avoid. The objectives in the RFP that were put out are compatible, and in fact we share them. The objective of creating 750 jobs we share. We think it's attainable over a 10-year or so build out. The idea of targeting 15% to clients, former clients of DMH, is certainly in keeping with both our organization's histories and the organizations, the rest of the organizations that are involved in this. We are approaching this from the idea that we're going to preserve historic structures where possible, preserve the open space where possible, create high-quality construction jobs. And the last item is something that we all live with, and that's a commitment to full community participation throughout the planning and development process. Calthorpe's whole approach to development really is focused on that in the community design process. I'm not going to read this. There's a handout that has this on it, but these are the goal that we see for the development. What we aren't about is creating a campus development. We believe that what we're creating here in our vision here is to create a new village in Northampton that builds on the assets of the city of Northampton and that is designed to benefit and address the housing, employment, and civic needs of the people of Northampton. Sort of the guiding principles behind what we think ought to go into this plan are, again, continuing community planning process in both the design and the implementation, the creation of a mixed-use neighborhood where commercial and residential uses are within walking distance of each other, and preservation of open space, planting, scenic vistas. And I think anybody who's walked this site knows that that's what gives this place a lot of the character it has. Preserving the historic buildings where feasible, infrastructure that enhances high technology. One of the things that we think is very important is that we build on the strengths of the community here. Mount Auburn Associates has already done some preliminary work and we've passed around their outline report. What we believe, and I think the CDC's approach to this as well, is when we're talking about economic development, we don't think the kind of economic development that's going to happen here is Sun Microsystems coming and building a new plant here, or Mass Mutual Insurance opening up a new back office here. The kind of development that makes sense for Northampton is what builds on what's here. And the whole area of new media, we did a sort of a quick scan and found 150 to 200 businesses in the Northampton area that are in this whole area of new media, whether that's software development, filmmaking. There's a whole sector that Northampton has become somewhat of a mecca for without trying. And we think that as you develop this site, there's an opportunity to build on that new media, to create good jobs, to attract people that are going to be beneficial to the community. Here's the approach to the site, as you've all seen it. Again, these are the kinds of things that we think are important to preserve. The river, which wraps really 3/4 of the site, that has opportunities for recreation and really gives a lot of the character to the site. And probably the most important thing that we want to do is in developing a plan is build on what's here. And this is just a blow-up of what exists now in Northampton. The kind of density, the kind of scale, this new urbanism that our colleague from Calthorpe talks about is really old urbanism here. It's residential and commercial uses in close proximity. It's building in a way that people can walkable areas. Now, I'm going to get into the slides in a minute of our preliminary concept, but I kind of want to start, before I do that, give a caution, and that is that sometimes when things get put on paper like this, and this nice pretty drawing, you'll see when they turn the lights on, people think it's cast in concrete. And that's and what we want to make sure you understand is this is a concept. This is what we think is a possible approach. It incorporates up a lot of our design philosophy about what we think the site should be, but we're really committed to an interactive planning process that's going to result in a master plan that this broad-based consensus behind. This is the preliminary conceptual site plan that we've developed. As you can see, if you look at it in the context of the overall site and the parts of the site that have been preserved already for agricultural uses here and here, we're talking about building fairly high, what looks like high density here, but in the context of the overall site, preserving vast amounts of the open space. We see this as as much as a real estate deal, this is a community economic development project. There's a lot of community goals that, again, we share that sort of are overlaying this whole development. So, and a lot of the kinds of concepts that we've put into this are trying to address some of the issues that we think are important to the community. One of the things that we've done here is try to create access off of Route 10 here. There's and again, our designer had the liberty of just doing this with pen and ink, so he could dream. So there may have been a house or some things through here that I hope nobody who's living in that house is here. But again, it's conceptual. But anyway, part of the plan here is to get people access. That's one of the big constraints you have on the site. Is that out of focus or is it my eyes? That's a little better. That's better. One of the big problems you have with the site, particularly for commercial and economic development, is access. If the only way that people can get to the site is the way we all came today, which is up past Smith and down West Street and up 66. This is going to, being able to develop this is going to be really constrained. So what we've surmised and imagined here is that we can create access off of Route 10 and create a road that comes up and out 66 and continue on, but also can access to the site. Our concept really has the site being developed in a couple of clusters, sort of mixed use commercial sector here and a residential mixed use sector up here. This is a more blown up version of the same site. You can see now what we're talking about is as you come up Route 66, you're going to be coming as if it was a commercial center, like you were coming into the center of Florence. If you can imagine, along here what you will have is sort of a mixed-use commercial area. Someone was asking before about convenience store. We've imagined a convenience store right here along the main thoroughfare that would not just serve the people who live and work here, but also people who use this route for commuting back and forth from West Hampton or whatever. The kind of commercial retail we're talking about is very neighborhood-oriented. I think one of the things that we're very conscious of, and we know the city is that what we don't want to create here is something that's going to detract from or from downtown Northampton, which is really your asset. It's the envy of most communities in Western Mass, and we don't want to do anything that's going to adversely affect that. But if our goals, the city's goals of creating 750 jobs plus and 150 units of housing are going to be realized, then there will be some service needs. And we think by locating the commercial right along this main street, and this is, when you come up this hill, there probably would need to be a traffic light or something, and people are going to slow down, and this is going to be a commercial center. These purple, probably not purple, it's magenta colors are mixed-use buildings. We envision this to be multifamily, mixed-use, maybe some commercial on the first floor, residential above. This strip along here, we've identified this to be residential, sort of complementing the residential neighborhoods here and here. Down here on this lower part of the site, we see preserving these two buildings, which are the power plant and the old laundry, and maybe adding 2 or 3 more. This building here is the Grove Street shelter. Our designer again took some liberties there and said, well, maybe we ought to think about putting the shelter in another location. That's up for grabs. I mean, I think what the plan does and what it would allow for is what it will allow for is to think about different approaches here. Commercial center, Village Green. This is right in front of the Haskell building. We're expecting we will see that as sort of the focal point of the site. And then on the top part of the site, we are envisioning this to be more of a residential kind of use. We're envisioning trying to preserve at least part of the existing main complex. The possibility of a museum on the history of mental illness, or a mixture of that, and maybe some apartments on this side. He's took a little bit of calling that a church, but that probably would be some kind of a community type of a facility. This is the monument which people wanted to have preserved. Again, this is another view of the same thing. One of the things that we wanted to note was some public open spaces that allow people access to some of the important scenic vistas on the site. This is the view from the memorial complex. That view we're interested in preserving. This is the laundry building and the power plant that we think could get reused. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to quickly run through the last few of these. Conceptually, kinds of housing types. This is a senior housing development that Calthorpe, I believe, was involved in. Gives you an idea of the different kinds of housing that could take place. This is a renovation of some brownstones. There's a potential that we got to look at in terms of renovating some of the existing buildings. Attached row housing. This is an idea of just when they talk about this new urbanism. Well, one of the clear things to consider is just how much space. This is sort of more conventional subdivision with parking in the front, and how much space you have to use 130 feet from front to front. You narrow it, you create walking space, and you use a lot less space and create much more walkable kinds of environments. Again, this is what we're envisioning here is maybe, small lot, single family or attached housing in that area. This is a view of the main complex, and hopefully we're hoping to preserve at least that facade. But this is the challenge that we're facing. This is what it looks like inside right now in a lot of the building. Again, creating kind of open spaces, open areas, different kinds of housing types. What we're envisioning is a mix of incomes. This kind of sort of dense small lot development that allows you to preserve more open space, create more of a sense of community. We envisioned for parcel, I believe it's K, E, thank you. Probably a small subdivision, maybe 12, 14 units out there that would be probably single-family homes out that way that connect into the, utilize the part of the lot that's usable. I'm going to just go through this last couple of slides quickly and then stop. We're sort of we have in mind a two-pronged.
You know what, Jared, this may come out in conversation. So
Okay.
why don't you may do this one and then.
I'll do this one and then stop.
Yeah.
Okay. The last thing I just wanted to mention is we're envisioning a major planning process. That there's a lot of information that we still need to know in order to plan this site. We need to know more about the existing conditions, what buildings are preservable and what's not. What are the real goals? The income mix. There's a lot of goals that need to be addressed. In terms of income mix, what's the upper limit that you can have in market housing and still have a mix of incomes. We also think it's very important to get started, and there are opportunities. John Williamson from Plotkin has a half a dozen or so clients that he's working with that can't find space in the city of Northampton, looking for office space, looking for light manufacturing kinds of spaces, can't find it. And we believe that there are opportunities to get going quickly. And what we would propose to do is pick a pilot building. There are a couple of buildings that we believe are possible, and get started and begin to test the market, create some momentum, address some of what is already existing in the market demand, and probably from our point of view, from a developer's point of view, begin to create some cash flow so that this whole development isn't so dependent on public money. I'm being signaled to stop this. I'll stop, and there's a lot. Obviously, we've done a lot of thinking about this, and we have a lot of ideas, and we are very enthusiastic about the development. So I'm going to put this back up. And
I'd like to see if there's any questions from the CAC and then questions from folks that are here, and then I think it might be a good idea to take a little stretch, and then we'll come back. Okay? So why don't we see if there's any questions from the CAC?
What kind of financial resources can community builders bring to this type of project?
well, we've raised about $800 million in financing for a variety of projects, and as I said when we met at DCPO, If you're looking for a developer who's going to come with a pile of money and put it on the table, that's not us. We don't have, but we have access to capital. We have a lot of partners that we have worked with throughout our history that once we have a viable project here, we're very comfortable that we can raise the capital that's going to be needed to move forward. Now, having said that, we still believe that there's a big gap here. You've got $3 or $4.5 million that's already been appropriated. We think the gap is maybe bigger than that. And one of the things that's got to be quantified before you go too much further is, what's it going to cost to, tear the buildings down that need to get torn down, clean up the site, and get the site ready for development. And that, once you get all that through, we'll have a much better idea of what, what's going to take to move it forward. But, we think that raising the capital with a viable site like this, once it's cleaned up, won't be a problem for us. Bruce?
Springboarding off of Julie's question, assuming away the problems of the site, which seems to have stalled a lot of focus in terms of what the RFP required, what do you budget the project to run? I mean, in terms of the 10 years you've said to the 750 jobs, do you have a global view of that?
It's in the hundreds of millions, but we started penciling it out, and it's so, at this point, so speculative on a lot of it. We did pencil out, what it would take to get a little ways down the road, but to start penciling out what it's going to take to fully develop the site, it's.
But it's safe to say
numbers.
that it far exceeds anything that the group or the consortium has done to date.
Overall, yes. Now, one of the things I didn't mention, I neglected to mention, is that we don't necessarily envision being the only developer on this site. We, in fact, particularly on the commercial side, which is not something we've done some of, but haven't done to the scale that this site envisions, of bringing on a commercial partner that would work, would do some of the commercial work as well, or all the commercial work. We're not necessarily wedded to being the developer, but what you got to start with is a viable master plan that integrates all the uses here that people are interested in bringing onto the site. I think you can't design the housing and design the commercial, in isolation. It all has to be tied together. And so, yeah, over time it's a lot of money, but I think it's, some of the site will be developed by just parceling off some of these commercial sites and selling them to developers. The residential piece, that subdivision may end up being, divide that up, sell it off to local builders who, have to build to a certain design standard that gets established through the planning process. So the total dollars is a big number, but it's not like you need one person to come and put all that money on the table.
How big is Churchill?
It's 42 million. Yeah, but the project would, and we're doing one in Holyoke now. It's going to be.
And you, in partnership with Valley, come in as nonprofit organizations. You're not going to create a separate entity to.
Oh, there probably will be. I would assume that there would be a new corporation created to carry this out.
As a profit corporation, a for-profit design.
Probably, yeah. I mean, most of the real estate that we've done has been done through limited partnerships, where we've been a general partner or created for-profit subsidiaries to be a general partner. If the question is sort of gearing towards, is this taxable? Is that what Is that
Oh,
what
no, I
you're-
wasn't
no.
so, that's
But you
coming
can
up
answer
in the
that
next couple
question.
of months, but,
Yes.
no, I was looking more
Yeah.
in terms of the design, and it's somewhere along the line, somebody's gonna be looking to make something.
Right.
If this was done on a nonprofit basis, it changes the.
But I also don't want to delude you. I mean, we have been in business 35 years. We are a developer. What distincts us from being a straight private developer is our mission. But I mean, we have to make money. We have to earn our living through doing these kinds of projects. So it's not that we're, it's
No, thank you.
charitable.
Other questions from the table? Mr. Yakuza.
I guess all of us who have been involved in the process for however long think of the term quick start as a double-edged sword. We're Quick Start sounds wonderful, and then all of a sudden, Quick Start's kind of scary. Wait a minute, hold on a second. And obviously, we've heard from a individual parcel developer or prospective parcel developer about how quickly their timeline is and their needs are, and we see that this building is still in use here, and so there, there is life potentially on this campus or currently on this campus. Is that over? Should we be frightened of your term Quick Start? Is there something?
I hope not, because I think that I mean, I haven't lived this like you. I know a lot of people have lived this but I've followed it. I've lived, I live in the area, so I've followed it for the last 10 or 15 years. There is, the notion that what we're going to talk about is spend another 2 years planning and thinking about how this is going to work and allow more and more opportunities to go elsewhere. I mean, you have businesses in Northampton that are in Northampton that, will probably make a decision to go somewhere else if they can't find space. I mean, and so you have space. You have, you have this whole controversy about homelessness and people, advocating. You've got, 800,000 square feet of vacant space here, and we're going to, so I guess our point is that we're not proposing at all to say, turn it over to us, give us the deed, and see you later, and we'll get started. We envision, a planning process that goes on. But while you're doing that planning process, there are some opportunities here. The gentleman from the woodworking shop in East Hampton, get him in here. And there's no reason why, as soon as you work out an arrangement with DCPO, if that particular building is not going to interfere with the long-term development of the site, let's get them in here and get started. There's one of the buildings that we think is a viable candidate for that is the dormitory building, the men's dormitory building next door. It's right next to this building. It's a nice building that is very visible. That building's about 30,000 square feet. You could start with that building and divide that up into, for 3, 4, 5 users. You may end up, in the long run, having to spend the money twice, but it gets some momentum here and it begins to create some identity of what the site could be. So I wouldn't be afraid of it, but I think it's important. I think, I think there's a lot of pent-up anxiety in the community about getting this thing going. It's been sitting for so long.
The other thing that argues for doing it quickly, when parts of it that you can, is that we have, we don't want to be waiting for the next boom. We'd rather get in on this boom to do some of this. Should be easier. And we also have a unique, and maybe it's not going to last forever, situation in the state legislature that we may not have forever. And so we don't have, these opportunities don't come along every day. And so those argue for moving quickly.
Legislative accidents, we like those. Never mind. Other questions? Oh, I knew there had to be a few. Councilor Sullivan and then Mr. Reed.
Phil Sullivan, City Council. George,
Jerry.
This is the turn of my question. What exactly is your relationship with Valley CDC today as we speak, making this presentation? And great graphics, I've got to
With no slides, please.
No slides. I have
Okay.
4 more slides. We have agreed to enter into a joint venture on pursuing this, and our agreement is that community builders, with our resources and track record, will be the lead developer, lead entity of that joint venture, and Valley CDC will, through their connection, I'll let John speak to this, is on the team to make sure that, whether CAC is here or not or whatever, that there's access consistently through the next,
just looking for
20
short
years.
answers.
Well, that's the answer. We don't have, that's the.
You're not in partnership with them on any other projects? At the present time,
no.
or are you?
No.
No.
No, we work for
Because I
them.
hear
We work for them.
Start,
I'm
and I
sorry.
hear John Dunn saying we've got businesses that might be moving out of town if we don't hurry up and do something. And I don't think Valley CDC has the best track record, as far as quality and construction And there was some trouble over in Belchertown with some of their developments. They certainly didn't follow some of our rules and regulations here. That's all I'm just saying, I just wanted to get the relationship. It'll be a future relationship, not a present one.
Right,
If you do.
that's right.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Mr. Reed?
I know this isn't carved in stone, I mean, you haven't already got all the plans for all these residential units, but how many, it seems like a lot of units in the north, to the top of the drawing. How many are you envisioning roughly?
This build out, this plan could build, I think he calculated we could build about 200 units of housing and build enough space to accommodate 750 to 1,200 jobs, I think was the calculus. These buildings are some of these are mixed-use buildings, some of these are two-story, envisioned to be a couple-story buildings, kind of office space. The site has the potential, and I think these are the sort of trade-offs that the community needs to decide on. Has the potential of building more densely, and higher number of units or a lower number of units, and that's going to be informed by the economics of what really it's going to take to make it work, and what the goals of the community are. I know that when the CAC established these goals a couple of years ago, the 100 to 150 units of housing was arrived at. I'm not sure whether that was based on taxes or concerns. I think you're balancing that, and I think what we're proposing is that if you develop 150 units of housing or 200 units of housing, whatever, I think there's an economic balance that needs to be looked at here in terms of the taxes that get generated, both payroll taxes and real estate taxes from both the jobs and the housing. And I think, I know that that's one of the factors that needs to be looked at is what's the sort of fiscal impact of this whole development on the city of Northampton. You want to create something that's going to positively impact it. And I think I know there's concerns in this community and others about housing and what impact it has on the tax roll. So.
And just another question, did you say that on the parcel on the left that would be likely single-family homes or?
Probably, yeah, it makes the most sense there.
Off-site?
That's what it's zoned for,
Yeah.
basically.
But the ones, the same kind of drawings, up here, it's not that, you're talking about some other.
These might be single-family as well, or they could be attached, row housing. But we were figuring these as small, I think these are 60 to 80 foot frontage lots. These buildings down here were thought to be more, multifamily kinds of things, maybe apartments here, and these could be single family. But again, it's a concept. It's not, and I think if we get selected, it would be a starting point, not an ending point.
Other questions? I see one in the back.
Just a quick one. What's the opportunity for the state legislature that's done now?
I think he was referring, and I don't want to speak for him, but the happy accident of having the majority leader and the chair of the Senate Ways and Means. I think that was the happy accident he was referring to.
Yeah, I mean,
But I'm not sure that we can do anything with that, as we're doing so well in our school budget based on that happy accident that I wouldn't cash that check myself. It's true.
No, you're.
I'm right. Mr. Sheehan.
You get used to it.
Congratulations, the plan looks well thought out. One quick, or actually it's two questions. Can you just go through some of the conveyance issues as to how we hear quick start and then you're saying 2 years out for planning. How are you looking at the conveyance coming out of DCPO, and how dependent is the overall project on public dollars in terms of, I'm assuming you ballpark, what you would need from the state for assistance?
Well, first of all, we don't see it as 2 years. We see it maybe as a year planning process. To get a master plan that could get circulated among the bodies that need to approve it. We had a little bit of a discussion about this question about conveyance, and one option is that, for example, if this old dormitory building is the quick start building, then you start off with a lease that building during this interim period, that building gets leased over a relatively short period of time. And through that lease, you're able to do the renovations and lease up and fix up for that space. The overall site would not get conveyed until the planning was done, and the whole question about the remediation. And so that's another issue. It's an issue of, does the site get conveyed clean? Do you go through the process and tear the buildings down that need to get torn down and remediate all the asbestos and lead? First, does DCPO do that, or an agent of DCPO, or you convey it to a developer to do all of that? And if you do, there's a big risk there. I mean, I think and we think the risk, the $5 million is maybe half of that risk. There's probably a $5 to $10 million shortfall in this overall development, just to get the site to the point where you've got a master plan, you've got most of the public infrastructure done. A lot depends also, there's lots of little goodies here that we have in here, and it's up to the community to decide whether they want to build those up, but they cost money. A riverfront park here, access trails to the Mill River back here, et cetera. That kind of stuff costs money, and you have to figure out where the gap funding is going to come from to fill that. So it might be going back to the...
Site-related issues, you're at about $15 million?
Total cost?
No, just in terms of the site-related issues that you would be looking back to DCPO to
probably
entity to deal with.
More like 10.
On top of the 4?
No.
Total?
No, somewhere, again, we have not done a very detailed financial analysis of this yet, because there's so many variables. I mean, you've done it yourself, so you know all the variables, and so you're going to make so many assumptions. But
which makes it difficult to respond to the RFP.
Right, that's right, it does. But on the other hand, I think what you need to, we deal with projects that have big gaps and challenges all the time. That's the nature of the business we do. And so we think that whether it's $5 or $10 million, there's enough, this project has enough public benefit to it that with a consensus plan and the community behind it, that's a gap that can be filled. State spends, far more money on far less significant, important projects. So I think this is something but I think the first thing you got to do is figure out, how much that gap really is.
Other questions? Why don't we take a 2-minute break? And thank you, community.
Thank you.
Why don't we reconvene at 7 o'clock?
I would never do that.
No, seriously, I had a bagel while the lights were on. You want to have?
Anybody have an extra napkin?
Yep.
Shut the lights off.
And when it comes to eating, I'm your guy.
This gets their attention.
It gets their attention, doesn't it? Come on in and sit down, we're going to start.
Isn't it
Wow.
Very bad.
Very bad.
Oh, no.
That's when we're gays at that call.
Those days are over, me.
Mine too.
We're going to begin again. We have 2 more campus developers to hear from. And this is Joe Breen from Woodstock Associates, right? Associates?
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Straighten out the note show.
It's all yours. And I want to just correct something I said. Pioneer Valley Arts and Cultural Center has not withdrawn. They just weren't able to show up tonight. So I apologize for that. I misspoke.
Just hand these around. What I'm passing out is just a revised proposal. I've got some extra copies of the original one if anyone wants to see it, but this is probably more relevant. And we can just pass these around. This is a small version of the site plan. What this table has in this package is some talking points just to give you some ability to follow the discussion, a site plan on a smaller basis, and just a chart that we did that shows the different uses in the proposal and how we hope they tie together. We tried to be as, we didn't try to lose our pen. We tried to be as specific as possible with this. We just took a look at the existing property. It's consists of about 150 acres. It was built over the course of almost 150 years. The buildings have all kinds of serious problems in terms of the physical condition, their design and layout, et cetera, as well as environmental problems. There's almost 1 million feet of buildings if you go through everything, including single-family homes, and those are in various states of disrepair. Just a simple lesson in what I would call real estate economics. What you have here is a piece of land that has potential value in the future. It's encumbered by a lot of buildings on it that need to be demolished, environmental problems that need to be cleaned up, and also the need to construct infrastructure. In our humble opinion, that makes this thing basically a net liability overall. And we think that's kind of a starting point for discussing what gets done with it. Our strategy is basically to master plan the entire campus, keep that flexible over time, designate one campus developer, do a phased development, so you're biting off one piece at a time, basically. We would propose to co-develop each phase of this with a specialized developer would come in and do, whether it's apartments or elderly housing or whatever, but somebody who specializes in that. We do not specialize. We would plan to manage this over time in accordance with an annual business plan where we agree on goals with the city or the state or whatever as to what we have to achieve each year. In terms of the land, we have to, one way or another, there are various ways to do it. We would have to take the land down in phases as we propose to construct each phase.
Yeah, this isn't his.
And again, we would co-develop each phase with a developer specializing in each particular proposal. We think the co-development just brings more strength to the team. It gives you a specialist in each particular aspect of the thing, and it gives the city and the state a single contact point. Before any of this starts, we think a lot of things need to be done in terms of pre-development. The buildings have to be demolished, have to be taken down, the environmental problems have to be dealt with, and the infrastructure and utility issues have to be addressed. We basically, what you see here and what you see on the plan I handed out are the same. We demolish everything that you don't see here. So we're saving the 4 primary buildings in the B parcel, the small clubhouse building, this building, the Haskell building, and the original portion of the old main campus, and then one building up here, which we like, basically. The first thing we would try to address would be the most prominent parts of the property, which are right along the main road here in front of this building. We would tackle this first, saving these 4 primary buildings, converting those to apartments. That's either going to be mixed income or affordable housing exclusively, depending on the details of the economics. That's a very prominent property, so we think getting that in shape would just have a dramatic effect on the impression of the property. The second piece we would go after would be this piece of land here at the southeast quadrant of the main parcel. We would construct garden apartments there, basically market rent apartments. We would bring someone in to take a good look at this building, which we think lays out reasonably well for potentially for an assisted living facility. The last piece we would take on, although we begin marketing it initially, would be the main campus. We would market this main building and the land that goes with it to a developer of a hotel, spa, or conference center. We think with the land and the views and the facades you have on this building, which are quite attractive, you have something there that should be marketable. The last piece of this is we've called the Creative Arts and Technology Center. That's largely a philanthropic effort. We've actually approached some people on a very preliminary basis, one individual benefactor, as well as one arts foundation. And generally, what we think needs to go in here is a strong cultural component to kind of tie this overall thing together. But we think if you could get this done and this done, you have a very good interplay between those two facilities. The other thing that we would do here on the very southern part of this parcel, we would plan to construct light industrial buildings down here. We think there's good access or reasonable access now. There will be better access with some changes in the intersections here. But there is a cut through around downtown over the freeway. So we think this would work well as just a light industrial area, basically. Over time, over the long haul, we think a small convenience-oriented shopping center could be constructed on this corner because it's a very visible corner as traffic comes through here in and out of downtown Northampton. If this effort fails, either the philanthropic piece and the hotel spa conference center piece, you give that a couple of years, we think, market that. We have 2 people that we approach directly right now. We have not had those conversations yet just because this is pretty speculative at this point. But we think you give this a couple of years while you're managing the development of these other portions of the property. If this doesn't work, we think this building comes down and this becomes basically a tech park or an R&D type park. And there's an ability to kind of provide a second entrance so you're not driving trucks or through the residential area here. So we just think there's a good option here for that part of the site over the long haul. And then we just outlined a couple of simple options. This could potentially be converted to apartments or townhomes. That's a very, very expensive rehab job. It's more appropriate for more high-end use like we originally described, but it is a possibility. And it's also a possibility to convert this to an elderly housing or assisted living facility. If this becomes a tech park or R&D park up here, we think this building that we're in may convert reasonably well to a limited service type hotel. That's pretty much it. We would rely very heavily on both the city and state to play the roles we think they need to play in terms of a demolition, environmental remediation, and really preparing the site, getting it really to the starting line and removing some of those costs and liabilities that we talked about. In terms of the financial incentives, we'd have to look to try to even attempt to put this together. We clearly need a phased land takedown. We could never take this whole thing on up front. We'd need to work with the state, which awards tax credits for low-income housing and the historic tax credits. We'd want to work with the state and the city on the possibility of tax increment financing. We would strongly encourage the state and or city not to sell off what valuable parcels there are off of this, whether it's land or buildings, but to capture those proceeds and contribute them through some method, an escrow or whatever, back to the carry cost or rehabilitation cost for the rest of the property. That's pretty much what we'd require, we would attempt to negotiate in terms of assistance from the state and city. This is obviously our first crack at this. We tried to be specific. We think all of these things individually are doable. We can't just have somebody hand this thing to us and expect us to do it. It's something that we have to do with the state and city. But other than that, we think it's a reasonably practical plan. And that's pretty much it, pretty straightforward.
Thank you, Joe. The folks around the table have any questions for Joe? Mr. Folk.
I might have been in the middle of my dinner, or what was left of it. I didn't hear you tell me anything about Woodstock Associates, or who or what you are. Did I miss that, or just...
Woodstock Associates is basically a new company. I'm the principal. It basically consists of 2 architects and 2 people with strong commercial real estate backgrounds. We don't have a track record in terms of Woodstock Associates. We've all completed numerous projects over 10 or 15 years in various roles. So individually, we have very strong track records. As Woodstock Associates, basically we're new. We've got 2 or 3 substantial projects that we're working on right now, and we're putting those together.
Where are you based?
Woodstock, Connecticut.
Any other questions on the table?
Again, what kind of resources would Woodstock Associates be able to bring to this project?
I would kind of give the same answer I think the last guy gave, which is, I don't think any developer, and certainly not, we aren't going to come in and commit a substantial amount of money up front. Again, we think this is basically an overall liability, and we think basically the other side of the table needs to contribute resources to get the thing up to the point where they can, dispose of different land parcels and get people to come in and do what they're looking for them to do. So we would not make a substantial financial commitment to this thing. If somebody asked us to, we'd probably pretty much run like hell. I mean, kind of how we could look at it.
Run like hell,
We
that's
think
in the
anybody
minutes?
would, really.
I want to make sure that's in the minutes. Yeah, hell. Okay. Mr. Yakuza.
Thank you. You've mentioned a couple of times the need for, first of all, the net liability of the initial phase of the project. So you've emphasized a couple of times the need for the participation of the state and the city. I think Mr. Sheehan asked the question of the community of builders. What kind of number are you talking about? If there's $4.5 million left for remediation or infrastructure, what are you talking in addition to that?
We haven't analyzed that.
So you don't run like hell?
We haven't analyzed that. We think it's a big number.
It's a big,
I wouldn't even, I could throw out a number, but it's
But
so
I mean, when you
speculative.
talk in terms of net liability, you must have some idea what the net liability is of the land.
We haven't analyzed it. I mean, you'd have to go through this
If
with
if the state gave it to you, what would you ask for in addition to giving it?
If the state started throwing numbers at me to take this thing away, I'd leave the room, because it's so speculative. You would never want to get caught with this thing in a bag of money, because the bag of money might not be big enough, basically.
You could just leave
We
with
just
a
think
bag
that's,
of
we
money.
just think that's the reality.
But aren't there remediation firms that do?
Yes, there are. I mean, you can do the analysis. We haven't done it as of this date. That's the answer.
But with all your years of experience, can't you, is there $10 a foot for not taking down, you can't do that?
I mean, you could throw out a number to demolish a building, okay? But to demolish a building with these environmental problems is a whole different question. And given the interior design of the buildings with all the little rooms, you have a tremendously larger amount of wall space with lead paint on it. So the number just balloons relative to a normal office building or whatever. It's very, very hard to come up with just even guesstimate a number like that.
I mean, I'm kind of lost. Here we are listening to a response to an RFP, and there's no starting place. I mean, how can you be responding to an RFP without at least having in mind some place where you could start to plan a development? You can't start a plan for a development without something.
Can we try this question a different way, Joe?
Sure.
I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
Can I try your question a different way? If you assumed remediation, okay, that was done, let's forget
Right.
about that for a minute. How much money are we talking about here?
There's just no way to,
No, I'm talking about for what you want to do.
for what we want to do.
Yeah.
If you said, okay, you can do this, we'll do all the environmental remediation. In
How
terms
much
of,
pri-
you're
how
talking
much-
about the pre-development work, or just the cost of the overall
How
project?
much are you gonna have to go out and raise to do that?
Oh, I think you're,
Because that was ultimately the question that got asked by
somewhere,
the other person.
50, to do this is probably, you're talking $50 to $100 million, something
Okay,
like that.
that's.
I thought you were asking about just the,
That's
I
independent.
was actually, that's what my question was, but.
And the
Sure.
other, in the other scenario, the person answered the question from $5 to $10 million, and then answered the other question in terms of how much money ultimately the build out would be. Could you answer the question about the jobs on site and what you see in terms of the job development or job generation here?
any hotel is very labor intensive. Tends to be, people think of it anyways as more menial type jobs. There's always management and accounting and all those kinds of things. So we think there's a lot of jobs potentially there. The assisted living facility is a similar thing. There's a lot of very labor intensive business. In the light industrial park, it just depends on the tenants. If it's just warehouse use, not a lot. If it's some sort of a light assembly or whatever, you're talking more jobs, and whatever the skill levels are would just depend on the tenants that you brought in. So again, it's sort of like estimating the other thing. It's probably harder. I mean, it's very hard to just say, well, we project, 897 jobs by year 5 or something. It's very speculative.
In terms of the $50 to $100 million to develop this, what's the track record of the individuals involved in your firm at raising that kind of money?
Raising the money? Well, I mean, I personally have handled over $1 billion in real estate transactions around the country. I haven't raised all the money than that. I've generally been more in the role of the investor. We feel confident, and we've started going in order chronologically. We've talked about this piece, the affordable housing piece. We feel confident. We know who we would work with as a co-developer, Gatehouse Group out of Boston. We've run numbers on the thing very generally. We feel very confident that that is a financeable project. So, you know, we think we have very good contacts in the capital markets around the country, really. We've had very preliminary conversations, actually with the public REIT, and again, it's very preliminary about the light industrial and R&D part of this. But getting them to come to Northampton is probably more the issue than whether or not they have the capital. They certainly have the capital. We think there's plenty of money out there for assisted living facilities. That's pretty much a booming business right now. There's a lot of money out there for that. So we don't think that would be difficult to put together. And really the same with the garden apartments in this market.
Questions from the floor, Councilor Sullivan?
One of the questions, you retail possible space there at the corner of 66 and Earl Street. They have a monument there. Have you considered what's going to happen with that?
You know, I've driven by there.
The monument?
I can't tell you what the monument looks like. I know it's there. I've had trouble spotting it from the road.
Are you planning on removing that?
No, I think they asked us to try to find a way to preserve that. You know, we would try to do that, certainly.
This building here, you're talking about assisted living.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, like, would that be expandable to some of these other spots here? Is that going to stay open space? I mean, how many people could you get in a building like this, assisted living, in order to make, I mean, I look at Applewood over in Amherst and some of the others, and they're a lot bigger than this.
Mm-hmm. I think the answer you get is.
Talking additions?
You can certainly put additions on this building. There's land for it, and the building is configured in a way that you could do that.
Do you think somebody can make money with a building this size for assisted living? What we have to put into it?
I think the building, since the building is functioning, it's, you know, been sealed from the weather, it's, you know, all that. It's a good basic building. It's pretty solid construction. What goes on the surface is more superficial. I would think somebody could come in here and this would have value to somebody if the layout made sense. And off the top of our heads, we think the layout does make sense for a facility like that.
I just have one other question. I may have missed the answer. The hotel and spa, about approximately how many rooms are you talking?
It depends how much of the building you save. What we've said is save the center building, including the theater back here, save the 2 wings on the front, and then the first wing that cuts back. So, you know, you can, obviously there's more. It kind of continues to cut back this way. Just depends how much you want it to save. I mean, I think this probably represents, you know, 75 to 100,000 feet. It's 3 stories, most of it. The centerpiece was 4 stories.
My question is about how many rooms would a hotel, if somebody were going to come here and build this?
I think you're probably talking, you know, a facility like what we're thinking about, you probably want to be in the range of 75, 125 rooms, 100 rooms plus or minus. You wouldn't want to make it much bigger than that because it loses its charm or whatever, I think, some of its attraction.
Well, approximately 100 rooms. That's not a lot of rooms.
Okay.
Bay hotel, okay.
Other questions? You all set?
For now, thank you.
Some of the other groups have focused on creating a cohesive community that was strongly linked to the city. What is it about your plan that holds it all together, and how is it linked to the city?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess I'd say first, there were a lot of different goals, you know, addressed in the they asked to address in the RFP, and some of those just have to be compromised. That's sort of one thing. We tried to preserve some buildings and find a practical, as opposed to impractical, use for those buildings, and not just say, well, we're going to preserve all the buildings, and we tried to find a use that made sense for those buildings. So, just preliminarily, I kind of address it that way, but In terms of how it integrates into the community, you know, we envision this as a master plan campus. It would all be tied together. There'd be a similar architectural theme in the new buildings to tie them to the old buildings. We have walkways throughout the campus with sort of common signage, common improvements in terms of that kind of transportation. There is, I guess, a conservation easement here, and we proposed a linear park that would really go around the whole perimeter of the property, tie to the Smith College Equestrian Center, tie to the bike trail that's just south of here, and also eventually just loop around the large piece of conservation land that's to the west of the site. So that's one thing where, you know, we want to have people on the site, you know, using it and have it be integrated into the community as opposed to have it be a kind of a remote, removed, isolated campus. We've designed an amphitheater in here. There's a great lawn here with a great classical view of this building here. We think a public amphitheater here would work really well, particularly in Northampton. It's a great spot for summer, fall concerts, and, you know, public invited. It's kind of what we propose. You know, those are a couple of things we tried to build into it.
Mr. Reed?
David Reed from Union News. Overall, how many units of housing do you foresee on the site of all kind? And also, the fellow who asked the last question, I'm just wondering why you came to Northampton. What was it about Northampton that attracted you to this site?
In terms of the number of units of housing, this is somewhere in the range of 125 apartments here, depending on how big we build the units. This would be, you know, 75 to 100 units. We would not attempt to build a very dense apartment development here. I'm sorry, what was it?
Why did you come to Northampton with this?
Well, we had this sent for the RFP because we were intrigued by it, and having read it, we thought it was, you know, a great challenge to try to actually meet the goals of the RFP and still come up with something that was financially practical. Northampton has a great reputation. It's well known in the region and even around the country. And we thought it was a very attractive opportunity if you could get over all the hurdles in the RFP.
It was the first project for your for Woodstock Associates. These 4 architects who have done work before.
I'm sorry?
This is your first project for the group?
It's not our first project, no.
It's,
We're working on 2 or 3 right now. None of those have come to fruition, but, you know, we're working on them. We haven't, Woodstock Associates hasn't completed a project. The people in Woodstock Associates have, you know, long track records.
Mayor?
It's something I probably should have asked everyone, and maybe our friends in the state, as the process goes on, could ask these questions. I don't know that the mandate to preserve historical buildings is an absolute one. I believe that we promised the state's historic commission, we sort of, the planning department and the CAC and so on, as we wrote up the RFP, promised to try to save historic features where economically feasible. If you were given the option, in the interest of trying to figure out when you could start generating your private investment of 50 to 100 million and how many millions the state has to invest to get most of the demo and environmental cleanup done. In the interest of sort of making those figures more pragmatic, if somebody said, well, we could tear down all the buildings, or we could demo the entire site, and then you could be planning whatever you would put in place and looking for ways to fund it. Would you consider that a preferable alternative, or are there buildings there that offer some feature that you really think, real estate-wise, should be preserved?
I mean, my favorite building here is this thing. I think this is a great looking building. It's in the worst shape, so you have sort of a trade-off there. And I've kind of become a little fond of that thing. I think we like this building. This building that we're in, we think is pretty plain Jane, 60s institutional construction. Doesn't, do anything for me. And we think these buildings are somewhere in between. We don't think these are architectural gems the way, you might look at this. This is sort of the grand dame of the overall campus. But we think these are, if you clean these up, do the demolition, and kind of disconnect them. We think these are pretty attractive. These are actually pretty classical federal style architecture with some pretty good detail to them. Did I answer your question fairly?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've said that rehabbing them actually adds cost. And I think that's consistent with what we've heard from other people too. And I guess it's just a question for us as a community, as we give advice on this process, where is it worth adding cost to preserve an old building?
Right, I mean, that's,
Or should be that one of the areas where we compromise?
right, and that's something that we think the community has to kind of resolve rather than us. You know, we can do the work, but.
Other questions? I'm going to call on people who haven't spoken yet. Councilor Sullivan, Garrett, and then Mr. Sullivan. Yep.
I'm just curious, you mentioned several times that the principals and other projects, portfolios. Can you describe some of those projects?
Some of the projects we completed individually or the stuff that we're working on now?
Work that you're working on.
Okay, I mean, I've handled, again, over $1 billion of real estate transactions around the country, both from the financing side and the property and asset management side. A lot of that has been redevelopment of properties, even very severely impaired properties, not dissimilar to, not quite as bad as that building, but not too far from it. Really all over the country, office buildings, shopping centers, one hotel, all kinds of properties, apartment properties.
Do you have favorites?
We want a war story?
No. I'd rather hear about things that
The favorite projects I've worked on in the last 15 years have been the projects that have really been more community development oriented in the earlier stages of my career was what I was primarily doing. And those are my favorite projects. That's one of the reasons I'm here.
and the architects.
The architects have, again, different track records. One of them has primarily worked in residential, a lot of single family and some apartments. The other person has done really a mix of projects, commercial and residential. A fair amount of historic rehabilitation. And also she's been involved in some community development projects over time, so we have a lot in common in that respect.
So,
I have two real quick questions for you. In terms of the assisted living and the hotel, has your organization done any market analysis on that? On the
No.
viability of it?
Right, we haven't done a formal market analysis here. We do know from talking to people and reading press accounts that there appears to be a shortage of elderly housing and assisted units here.
A shortage in the region?
Right, that's what we're understanding from the newspaper. Generally around the country, it's not hard to generalize and say that business is growing, as demographics change in the country, and, there's a reason for that, which is generally there's a need, with an aging population, generally to develop those kinds of units. We haven't done a market analysis here, though.
How about the hotel, anything on that note?
We have not done a market analysis on the hotel.
And my second question was kind of leading back to the value of the site. If the site was fully remediated and offered to you as your organization as a greenfield for development as you propose here, what would you estimate the value of the site as?
If it were raw land or?
Raw land.
We'd have to talk to local appraisers. There's a problem with that, which is, you can say 1 acre of land is worth, $50,000.
Got zoning restrictions and everything
But that's
else.
different than saying, okay, if 1 acre of land worth 50 grand, what's 150 acres worth? It's not 150 times the 1 acre, because you have carry costs, it's a very long-term build-out. It's a relatively small market, so it takes a long time to build it out.
But you've said that you're looking back to the state to assist with your mediation issues and development
Right.
issues for the site. You've given no thought to what the estimated value would be at the end of all that?
We haven't analyzed it. I mean, off the top of our heads, we came up with a ballpark number. I wouldn't even throw it out because it's just so speculative. If you scrape the site and clean up all the environmental problems and turned it over, and it was zoned for a single family, we think maybe it's worth 25 to 50 grand an acre today.
Thank you.
Sure.
Councilor Sullivan.
The first question, nobody's discussed it, maybe it's been said somewhere else. The cleanup, where is all this debris gonna go? Is it gonna go in our dump? And then nobody's addressed the impact of the extra condominiums, houses, or whatever, the impact on water, sewer, fire, police protection, street cleaning, et cetera. And I'm just wondering, has that ever been, maybe it's supposed to go to the board rather than
I think
developers?
there have been, this group has been meeting together since, as I said, Phil, we were small children. And we've talked a lot over that time about the fact that we want, ultimately, at the end of this process, that this be producing tax revenues or that will offset the cost of the municipal services that will be required. And that you've heard people talking about industrial usage and a balance of industrial and residential usage. That's in order to create exactly that kind of balance in terms of tax revenue. And so I think you're right on the mark with that question. And that is a discussion that's happened, I think, over time with this group. And when you heard the discussion about targets for housing versus jobs, 150 housing units versus 750 jobs, that was a topic of, there was quite a heated discussion among this group because of the real concerns about housing needs in the cities, coupled with the fact that that there's a real need for jobs in the city and jobs with a base that produces tax revenues for the city. So I think that you're not off the mark with that, and I think the goal here is to create a mixed-use village that's in many ways carrying its own costs over time. And I said that we hadn't been meeting together since we were small children. I want to correct myself, Bruce was never a small child.
But you knew that.
I just want that on record.
Thank you.
As far as the disposing of the materials, probably is environmentally friendly, so we can dispose them somewhere else.
Okay, do we have other questions for Mr. Breen? Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
We have one more presenter who, let me get my cheat sheet here, it's getting late, and you all get a Medal of Valor for hanging in. The last presentation is by Wilson Briggs Foundation, and they're looking to be campus developer for, well, I'll let them present, you'll hear. Okay, Carrie's found the.
Thank you for waiting.
So this is John Lee representing Wilson Briggs. John, hi. We met with you earlier last week in Boston with your
Dean of Faculty.
Right. And at that time, we were able to get into more philosophical questions. I think today, we've asked people to do a short presentation, and then people have been asking questions about the nuts and bolts, as you've heard. So, take it away.
Well, I won't go into the main items of our response to the RFP. I think I should aim it at those that are aimed towards the Northampton residents and the Northampton interest. We have given DCPL permission for you people to receive copies of our development proposal, and have they arrived yet, or are you still waiting, first of all?
We're still waiting.
Okay, any idea on how soon CAC will be getting certified copies from DCPO?
I can't tell you exactly, but hopefully soon.
Well, I could issue a non-certified copy. It won't be any different than what DCPO.
I'm conscious of time, John, so you have 20 minutes. Why don't you do it, and we'll make sure that people get copies.
One of the points that we want to make is that it's Wilson Briggs University, which is a private institution. It's not affiliated with any existing institution or concerns. It's self-funded. We wish to use the Northampton State Hospital property and buildings for our main campus site, which will house our 12 museums, administration offices, and some of our main reference libraries in an underground mode. Since we are historic preservation orientated and we do archival museum work and degree programs, these are the programs that we are going to base on this site. Our other programs, from agricultural to zoology, will be based off this property. We will put no dormitories or housing on this property. We will do nothing to this property that would invade the National Register status. We're locating those other items associated with existing universities and colleges within the community and the surrounding area. There will be no chemicals, no production on this property. Our bus system from Chattanooga, Tennessee is the most advanced, high-tech, high-powered electrical system possible. We will be using that between this campus facility and the rest of the facilities of the university. In addition to that, we, in our proposal, have offered to take many of the current community responsibilities within the structure of the university. In its health, science, and medical facilities, Wilson Briggs University has made the proposal for a section of this property where we can establish our AIDS hospice treatment and care facility. And the director and our associates at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and our two other academic institutions in Boston will be putting a more detailed package concerning that once we get confirmation from DCPO. This will be the first no-expense AIDS facility in the area. The university is going to maintain the full funding for this. We can do it because our staff is already online. It would be a teaching facility as well as a proper care facility. Our initial bed allocation is 40, but we do see as it progresses down the road we may expand it more than that. We also have put in and had discussions with the mayor and Council President Higgins that we'd like to take over 91 Grove Street. It's hard when there are no more federal, state, county, and city grants coming in to maintain programs that government shouldn't be in the first place. Since I'm one of the original founders from hour one in the establishment of 91 Grove Street, I know its objectives and how it should be run and how we can improve it. The university's continual commitment to a cash flow to run 91 Grove Street doesn't maintain only a housing and a meal facility, but we've made a commitment in our response to DCPO where we would pay the tuition of its residents to go to Holyoke Community College in some degree programs, and that we would put them in our academic structure for other educational facilities. We've also, in our statement, agreed to hire in the development and the rehab and reconstruction of this campus those medically qualified people who reside at 91 Grove Street, not at minimum wage, but at the regular trade and union wages of the area. The other proposal that we have in section K2, I believe, which is currently the equestrian field and the sliding hill. When the Commonwealth owned the property, it was safe. Nobody would sue the Commonwealth. It was a self-confession of trespassing. Since it would cost us $400,000 a year just in liability premiums for that property, we have found a way to detail a better use, which is putting up what I would call the Hollywood Bowl structure. And the sliding hill, as it's currently known as, is naturally terraced for a Greek-style amphitheater. It has enough space on the hill with minimal reconstruction and enough seating area on the bottom land in front of the shell where we could have about 3,800 people safely put there, and we could have our summer music program, which runs from Memorial Day to Labor Day. Since our academic calendar begins on March 1st and our graduation is the weekend before Thanksgiving, it wouldn't interfere or cause any problems with Smith College operations.
John, I want to make sure, some of the other proposers have brought pictures so that the people got the visuals, and I know you didn't do
Yeah.
that, so.
Well, we've had them.
Right. I just want to make sure we have all this sketched out, and then we can open it to questions. So
Okay.
what you're suggesting is that you use the entire campus for your college, right?
Including much of the land in the legislation that is currently under the city's control, yes.
That's right.
And we would be paying the city a handsome price.
You would like to purchase those from the city?
Correct.
You would like to have Castle Building, which is currently not available under the RFP.
That's a mandatory requirement for the purchase
Okay.
of the property in our
And for
proposal.
those folks who didn't get a chance to read your proposal, you would like the state to reroute Route 66 in order to, around the back of the campus.
Which would be down West Street, out Grove Street,
Right.
and directly to the,
Right,
to
right,
the
right.
jail.
And the thing that I think, and you have a private foundations that are funding this whole thing,
Yes.
and would, you haven't, in the place where you're meeting the 150 housing requirement?
At the CAC meeting, which I attended 2 years ago, I believe, and you can correct me, that it was said that the housing didn't have to be on this parcel, it could be spread out in the
That's only,
local
that's
communities.
only for the housing for the mentally ill, not for the housing
That's
generally.
correct. And as we stayed in Boston, we have a minimum 500 unit commitment to that
Okay.
in our off this site development process, which is a $300+ million capital expenditure.
Okay, and that you, okay. So that's kind of the big picture for folks. Now, and maybe what you
There
can.
are two more important.
Okay.
Our articles of incorporation, both for the foundation and the university, prohibit us from using federal, state, county, and municipal money. We are 100% restricted from seeking waivers from property taxes and applications to other grants, because that is the same thing as
Okay.
taking checks. The other thing is, the rerouting of Route 706
Oh, yep.
in the 2 circles that the university would pay for a full year service. The current 706 stops at Florence Heights Housing Project.
This is the PVTA bus loop John is talking about.
And it goes back to Academy of Music. We want the bus to continue a full circle, one clockwise and one counterclockwise, and we're willing to pay it. And we'll be using our electric buses from Advanced Technology in Chattanooga.
Okay. So given that whole framework, is there anybody at the table that has any questions for Mr. Lee?
Is Wilson Briggs an existing university?
We are existing because we are completed with the U.S. Department of Education. There were 2 things with the Massachusetts Board of Higher Education that we have been allowed not to do to complete our degree granting authority in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Our first presentation of our graduate and undergraduate programs has already been finalized through Mass Higher Ed in Boston, and the 2 waivers that we got pending that application, everything else is being processed and certified to them. We're not going to release the names of our faculty because many are currently employed at very high-ranking positions and mid-ranking faculty levels at existing institutions in the area. We're not going to release the name of our over 2,000 individual members in our Board of Governors, which is the body that our 22 trustees are chosen from. Those 2 things not being submitted with Mass Higher Ed's approval will come after a resolution from DCPO. Other than that, we've qualified. And remember, just so I can give you, those of you that were at Boston got the copy of the certified document for Wilson Briggs University, and if I'm remembering the totals, it was something close to, but don't hold me on it because it hasn't been sent to the computer, 90 associate degree programs already certified in the various schools with department heads, full faculty, curriculum, and classes that we cannot publish because we're waiting for the second certificate. There were 270 Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science degrees that have already been put through. There was about 160 master's degrees and almost 90 PhD degrees. We wouldn't be spending $500,000 at $1,000 a degree in Boston certifying if our intent was not completely what we say it is.
What's the source of financing?
I spoke to our financial people afterwards. We're issuing 20 and 30-year bonds, and DCPO, Meredith and Grew, and our staff that works with the Securities and Exchange Commission, we had a conference just the other day, and our bonds are ready to be issued in less than 90 days once we get clearance from the Commonwealth. So there's over $300 million in bond issues that will be employing about 20,000 people in the first 5 years.
Any other questions from the table? Any questions from the floor? Okay. Okay, well, thank you, John. We'll make sure, you'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of John's proposal? Okay. No decisions are going to be made tonight, John.
I understand that.
Okay. So I want to thank you for being here. Can we take a 2-minute stretch and then we'll rejoin with each other and have a little discussion? Thank you.
Okay.